in our script here, I posed a question to you, and we didn't talk about it, so we'll just kind of go off the cuff a little bit. Do we want to talk about Super Centex awards and the front who the front runners might be, or would you rather describe what a front runner for Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year looks like at this point to you?
Maybe the latter, just because I do feel like even more so than the team aspect of the season and how it is not fully written. Certainly, the player aspect. It's not to say we don't know who's good out there, and we do have some ideas probably on who could win Offensive Player of the Year, who could win Defensive Player of the Year on our Super Centex team, but a lot of that will still yet to be determined, and so going into what makes that person, I think that is an interesting thing to talk about, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions maybe out there. Look, when we look at this, we do try to treat 2A through 6A on a sort of level playing field, and realize that this isn't a recruiting list. We do a recruiting list. If you want to see that, check it out. But this isn't necessarily who's the best prospect out there. This is who had the best season as a high school football player on that side of the ball. And it's obviously subjective. It's obviously our opinion. It doesn't mean it's flawless or perfect. And we have a lot of arguments about it when we meet, I mean, we break it down, and it's not like we always are unanimous on this decision, but it is our collective decision. Sometimes it does come down to a vote, and we do not reveal those votes, but
okay, but you've done a lot of apologizing for our process, but just tell me what a player looks like.
Okay, so stats matter. Stats absolutely matter, but stats aren't the be all end all. For me personally, it's a combination of stats, which certainly signifies their impact and production, and kind of what they did to lead their team, right? I don't feel like we're very often going to have a Super Centex Offensive or Defensive Player of the Year whose team didn't make at least, a 3 or 4 round deep run into the playoffs, just because we have too many of those teams to ignore someone.
Right. And they have another third of a season to accumulate stats.
That's right. That's exactly.
And there are players on teams like Mart who don't really play a full game until the second or third round of the playoffs.
And we take that into account as well. So that's why I say stats matter, but we also realize, look, I mean, Kevin Hoffman told me one time about Tyreek Horn in particular, who was like a 2,000-yard rusher. He was like, I could give this guy, 3,000, 4,000 yards. I mean, he was sitting them pretty much the second half of a lot of games. And Mart still got those guys, those kind of players. So yeah, that's why I say stats aren't the end all be all, but they do help us in the process.
Now, I'm going to go a little bit more like theoretical about this year and what our guys are probably going to look like in terms of who's the Offensive Player of the Year, who's the defense. I feel like the Offensive Player, this not being a very big stat year so far, I think versatility is going to play into it. For one thing, I feel like offenses are trending more towards having, like, I'm not saying this guy is a front runner or not a front runner, but look at how they're using Trey Wisner and Conley, in a slot receiver or running back role. And there are several players in our area who are making plays on both sides of the ball, but then also at different positions in offense. So I think versatility is going to be a big factor on offense. I do have a player in mind that I feel like could be a player of the year that's not going to have 1,000 yards rushing or 1,000 yards receiving or, anything like that. But his impact on his team is just that big,
Well, throw that guy name out. Let's,
Okay. All right. I'll say, and this guy is not a cinch by any means, but the biggest game changer I've seen for a team this year, and both watching games and seeing how big games have played out, has been the Wolfman in West.
And has some honestly ridiculous return stats.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we don't talk a lot about it, but I mean, special teams can flip a game in a hurry. We see it on all levels of football, and it's the same in high school football. I mean, if you've got a kid that can break a long return and flip a field like that, I mean, it makes a huge impact. And again, I know you said you don't want to talk about college football here on the high school football podcast, but talk to SMU about, what a return can do to a team. They chose to kick to Houston at the end of that game last week, and it lost them the game. So
I didn't know Houston was ranked, by the way, this week. That just galls me, but we won't get into that.
Anyway, Wolf's a good choice. Another one just to throw out there. I mean, to me, if Major Bowden ends up leading China Spring to a state championship, I think he'd be a guy to certainly talk about. Not saying that he would only be in the conversation if they win state, but
no, and that's a really good point. I mean, the argument for Major Bowden is a strong one. I mean, because he's the leading rusher for that team, I'm pretty sure, and he's just the dude on their offense. Now they have a lot of good players, and offensive linemen don't get enough love in conversations like this. But yeah, definitely. That's one. You're on track there. And let me say about defensive players, just in terms of what I think might do it on the defensive side this year, is interceptions and sacks might be a big player on the defensive player of the year. They'll just general disruption and superlatives.
Yeah, and it seems like our award on that side of the ball often goes to a linebacker or sometimes a DB. I feel like much like the O-line, the D linemen maybe I don't want to say get overlooked, but they have a tougher road because they're not going to usually accumulate as big a stats as a linebacker, who's a lot of times those D linemen are occupying blockers so the linebackers can fly around and make tackles. But I would be interested to hear your thoughts on, because you've talked about him before on this podcast, throwing a guy around, Joe Gutsall at Lorena.
Right. And I was just about to say, I mean, I feel like I'm starting to be a little bit West and Lorena obsessed, but I might as well just lean into it. But yeah, I mean, I think Joe Gutsall is maybe the guy, and Baxter Bankston from Lorena has, I think, 7 sacks or maybe 9 sacks or something like that this year. And I think that might be partially a product of teams having to pay so much attention to Joe, because, I mean, I've seen him toss down running backs. He has, I think, a 47-yard interception return or something ridiculous like that for a D end,
And he was our, just to put it out there, he was our Super Centex defensive newcomer of the year last year. So
yeah, he's got a motor, you know what I'm saying? I mean, he's big and got a motor, and that's scary at the high school level.
Yeah. I mean, there were guys like Bo Blackshear and Andrew Billings who were that way and were able to really make sizable impacts.